I did not argue that Sunday morning. I poured fresh tea, smiled at my children, and told them I would think about their dormitory idea. Lena relaxed. Victor tapped a message into his phone. I watched the light in his eyes when he looked around my 5 rooms and saw square meters instead of years of our lives. Then I cleared the cups, closed the kitchen door, and let the silence return to its natural shape. That was the day I stopped being their mother in the way they expected and became the keeper of my own future. I am 72. My husband Yuri died 3 winters ago. We moved into this apartment the year Lena was born. He installed the parquet himself and hung the bedroom door crooked so that it sticks a little in the humidity. I never fixed it. The door still sticks. The kitchen still holds the smell of dill and yeast when I bake on rainy afternoons. Every window has a history. Lenotchka's first fever, Vitya's handmade kite whipping in a storm and tearing free. The day Yuri came home with a bruised cheek because he defended a stranger on the trolley. My home has breath. My children forgot that and reduced it to a floor plan. I began with paper. The housing office still keeps ledgers with handwriting that looks like tiny fences. I brought a folder and a calm face. The clerk on duty recognized me from the library years when I volunteered in the archives. She joked that I loved paper more than people. I told her paper tells the truth when people forget. I requested certified extracts for every title entry, every amendment, every note. I asked for a copy of the privatization agreement from 1993 and the subsequent clause Yuri filed in 2008 after his first heart scare. The clerk frowned when she saw it. I folded the certified copy and slid it into the front of my folder. The clause granted me lifelong residence and control over any transfer, no sale, no gift, no exchange without my explicit notarized consent. The notary had written carefully, each flourish a small fence of its own. I scheduled a medical evaluation with my old neurologist. He is a small man with meticulous hair and polite hands. I told him I wanted a full cognitive assessment. He administered tests and watched me as if he could see thoughts move through my head like fish in a clear river. When he signed the report, he wrote that I am mentally competent, oriented, decisive. I asked for 5 copies. He asked if I wanted to tell him why. I told him I would send him an apple pie instead. He laughed and asked for prunes in the crust, the way my husband liked. I changed the locks. A young locksmith arrived with a steel toolbox and calloused fingers. He smelled faintly of engine oil and mint gum. I paid in cash and asked him to install a deadbolt that sounds like a vault when it turns. He asked if I expected trouble. I said trouble already has a key, so let us make new keys. He smiled and nodded. That night I opened Yuri's old metal cash box that still carries the ink smell of government stamps. Inside I kept a second set of documents that our lawyer, Paulina, made us assemble years ago after a client of hers lost her apartment to a cousin who forged a signature. Durable power of attorney, limited to health decisions only. A sealed letter from Yuri, with instructions on what to do if our children confuse love with entitlement. A list of names. The name at the top was Detective Majorov, retired, who now runs a private agency that finds missing heirs and missing motives. I ran my finger over the names and felt Yuri's steady presence in each letter. On Tuesday, Victor returned with a soft voice and a hard smile. He brought his wife, Anya, who stayed near the hallway, as if she wanted to measure the space by the width of her handbag. Lena called in over video chat, pretending this was a family meeting, but holding herself like a chairwoman. They spoke about safety and socialization, and how the dormitory had a knitting circle. I showed them tea and biscuits and kept my eyes friendly. When Victor produced a folder and a pen, I watched his hand. It did not shake. Inside the folder was a proposed family agreement that would allow them to register themselves at my address and allocate rooms while I retained the smallest bedroom as my personal space. Their lawyer had included a clause about future sale with family priority. The language was careful and warm. It read like a lullaby. I asked for time to read it. I placed it on the table, and as they chatted about paint colors, I turned to the kitchen sink and pressed the on switch under the counter. The small black box hummed. 2 microphones embedded in the skirting board recorded every word. Victor left the folder. Anya left her perfume lingering near my bedroom door. Lena sent follow-up messages with links to dormitories that looked like hotels in the photographs and prisons in the comments. I responded with little blue thumbs and 1 red heart. Then I hid the folder in the piano bench and called Polina. Polina does not waste words. She listens and then drills through the center of a problem like a surgeon. She told me that my first priority is safety. She told me to move my savings to a new bank and to deactivate online access until we finish every step. She told me that some children move quickly once they smell advantage. She asked if I suspected a forged power of attorney. I said I suspected something simpler and uglier, coercion by kindness. She exhaled. She reminded me that kindness used as a tool can be presented to a court as a weapon. On Wednesday, I visited the notary who signed the 2008 clause. She's almost 80 now, with hair the color of cigarette ash and eyes that still cut straight. She remembered Yuri. She remembered his hands. Her office smelled like ink and citrus cleaner. We executed a life tenancy deed and a transfer upon death to the Women's Shelter Foundation. The deed created a trust in my name and removed the apartment from the casual reach of family hands. The notary stamped 3 copies and patted my wrist. She told me to bake myself something sweet and eat it slowly. That same afternoon, I went to the building council meeting. The men who always argue about the elevator stood beside the samovar and explained to me again how the machine room needs a new lock. I listened and then volunteered to join the council. No one refused the woman who brings poppy seed rolls. By evening, I held a copy of the house rules and a key to the meeting room. On the last page of the rules is a little clause about unauthorized occupancy. Tenants cannot move new residents into an apartment without council registration. I slid the rules beside the deed in my folder and felt a small, quiet satisfaction. The first crack appeared the next day. Detective Majorov called and told me his junior researcher found a new listing online from a small agency downtown, a 5-room apartment in my building, my floor, my view. The photographs were old and grainy. The listing referenced a client who could sign quickly by power of attorney. The agent had used the words urgent relocation. My breath slowed. It did not stop. It found a lower gear. I asked Marjorov for the agent's name and told him to close his eyes and type so he would not have to lie later. He laughed and said he already knew me. Polina filed a preemptive notice with the property registry, a simple statement that any attempt to transfer my apartment without my physical presence and personal signature should be frozen and flagged for review. It is a small measure, but it puts a bell on the cat. She also sent a formal warning to 3 notary officers she trusts, alerting them to a potential forged authority. The law hates to be surprised. I prefer surprise to land on my side of the table. On Friday evening, Victor returned with flowers and an older man in a dark coat who introduced himself as a notary. He had gentle hands and damp cuffs. He said he could help me simplify everything. He said I could avoid the trouble of future paperwork. He smiled at his own comfort. I offered everyone tea. I asked Anya to take my coat. She hesitated. I watched her eyes travel to the piano bench. She did not open it. The notary took out a single page and placed his finger on the signature line. He said I could authorize Victor to handle all property matters. He said it would free me from stress and errands. I asked him to read the text aloud. His voice faltered when he reached the paragraph that surrendered my right to veto any sale. He cleared his throat and continued. I nodded and asked him to leave the papers with me until Monday. Victor squeezed the air between his teeth. The notary complained of an early train. I apologized and sent them home with cake wrapped in napkins. When the door closed, I pressed stop on the black box under the sink and copied the audio to a small flash drive. I did not sleep that night. I lined up documents across the table like soldiers. Deed with life, tenancy, and the foundation remainder, preemptive registry notice, cognitive assessment, audio files labeled by date and guest, photographs of the online listing with the agent's name circled. I stacked them in a new folder labeled with teeth. At dawn I baked cinnamon buns and took 2 to the doorman. He told me about deliverers who came when I was out 2 days ago, men who asked about parcel access. He wrote the time on a piece of cardboard. I wrote thank you on the same cardboard and tucked it into his pocket. Saturday afternoon, my granddaughter, Sophia, slipped in like a beam of light, 8 years old, hair like ink. She spoke softly and hugged for a long time. She told me her mother said Grandma needs help downsizing. Sophia asked if I will still live near the chestnut tree where we count the first blossoms. I kissed her forehead and told her my roots love this soil. She understood that I meant something more. Children often understand hidden meanings better than adults. I fed her cherry vareniki and watched her draw a house with 4 windows and 1 yellow cat. She left the drawing on my fridge with 2 magnets shaped like lemons. When Anya collected her, she looked at my locks and measured the door with her eyes again. On Sunday morning, Lena arrived with a suitcase and a brittle smile. She said she was staying a few nights to help me pack. She said the dormitory manager could show me a room on Tuesday. My building council neighbour, Galina, knocked a moment later with a jar of pickles. She is wide-shouldered and sharp-tongued. She works at the maternity clinic and has seen more negotiations than any court clerk. I invited her in and made sure Lena saw how comfortable my home is with witnesses. Lena tried to play the affectionate daughter. Galina complimented my sturdy deadbolt. Lena blushed. She called Victor to come over right away and bring Anya. They arrived with that purposeful rush people use when they mean to take control of a scene. I set the table for an early lunch, soup steaming, bread still warm. Documents hidden deep. When the soup was almost finished, I asked Lena to fetch napkins from the sideboard. The folder labelled with teeth sat beside the napkins. She did not even pretend to resist. She lifted it with the care of a burglar. Her face changed as she read the deed to the foundation. She said my name with an edge. Victor stood up so quickly the chair scraped like a shout. He asked for the folder. I handed it to Galina instead. She read the key sentence and then looked at my children like a head nurse watching careless interns. She said the house does not belong to your plans anymore. She said the life of their mother has weight. Then she poured more soup into her own bowl as if the matter were settled. Victor produced the single page again. He urged me to sign. Lena spoke about betrayal. Anya said nothing and watched my hands. I stood. I told them the life I built with their father does not shrink because they feel crowded in their own lives. I told them I am not moving to a dormitory with strangers because they prefer to measure love in walls and rent. I told them I know about the online listing. I told them a retired detective knows too. I told them a prosecutor would read our recordings over breakfast. I told them they still have time to be my children and not my adversaries. They did not leave. They brought thunder. Lena raised her voice and said words she cannot take back. Victor threw his napkin and walked into the hallway, pacing and calling someone who did not answer. Anya picked up her handbag and then put it down again, torn between pride and fear. Galina washed the soup pot and hummed a folk song as if to anchor the room to an older rhythm. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Polina with a thin man in a blue jacket. He introduced himself as a district investigator. He had a copy of the online listing printed on cheap paper and a request to ask me a few questions. I invited them in. He glanced at the new deadbolt with approval. He sat at the table and listened to Lena's rage and Victor's justifications and Anya's silence. He never raised his voice. He asked me to sign a statement that I did not authorize any sale or power of attorney. He asked if I had recordings. I handed him the flash drive. He put it in a little evidence envelope and sealed it with a sticker. He told me to expect a call. After they left, my apartment felt heavy with the weight of unspoken history. Victor said he needed air and stormed out, Anya chasing him. Lena stayed and cried in dry, angry gasps. She spoke about her mortgage and the pressure on her shoulders, and the long shadow of a life that never felt secure. I listened. She said she always felt like I loved this apartment more than I loved her. I walked to the bedroom door that sticks and opened it with the same push and lift I have done for 4 decades. I showed her the dent on the frame from the day she learned to ride a bicycle indoors because of rain. I told her the dent is my favorite scar in this home. She covered her face and sobbed for real. Then she left without taking any of her suitcase out. That night I slept with the window open and the document folder under my pillow despite the discomfort. I dreamed of Yuri building shelves and laughing when they leaned and then fixing them anyway. In the morning I woke to a message from Sophia. She sent me a photo of a cat she named Lemon. She wrote that Lemon prefers stairs to elevators. I sat with that silly line and felt something inside me loosen. On Tuesday, the district investigator called. He said the agent confessed quickly and handed over messages from a number saved as V. The notary with damp cuffs suddenly looked very dry. The recording captured the moment he said, "Surrender your veto clearly." Polina filed for a protective order to keep my children from entering without permission. The court clerk stamped it with a loud thunk that sounded like a door closing gently but firmly. News spreads in buildings the way heat rises. On Thursday, my neighbor across the landing, a widow named Rima, who never smiles, came to my door with a box of buttons. She said her niece almost signed something like what I almost signed. She asked me to tell her niece how to arm herself with paper. I told Rima to bring her niece on Sunday for tea. And lesson 1. By Sunday, I had 12 women in my living room. We put the couch against the wall and lined chairs like a classroom. I brought a chalkboard from the council room and wrote 3 headings. Title: Capacity, Consent. We practice sentences that sound final and also kind. We paired the most timid woman with the loudest. We agreed to text each other when any family member used the word dormitory with a smile. Victor did not call. Lena sent 2 messages that sounded like apologies without bones. Anya wrote 1 sentence late one night. She said she is tired of the way money distorts love. She said she did not know about the listing until after it appeared. I did not respond quickly because speed is not always kindness. 2 days later, she sent a photograph of Sophia asleep with Lemon the cat curled under her arm. I sent back a green heart and the word sleep. The door between us did not open, but it unlocked. The investigator scheduled an interview for Victor and the agent. The notary tried to recuse himself from reputation damage and then discovered that reputation is not an organ that can be surgically removed. Polina told me that the prosecutor would likely pursue attempted fraud charges. She also told me something else. Children who imagine property as a solution often carry a panic that has nothing to do with their mothers. She asked if I wanted to scorch the earth or plant hedges. I said I want the house safe and the children alive to grow out of their panic if they can. We prepared for court. The hearing took place in a room with peeling paint and a plant that should have been repotted last year. The judge wore tired eyes and a clean collar. Victor entered with a lawyer who spoke too fast. Lena sat behind them, small and watchful. Anya did not come. The agent stared at the table and wrung his hands. The notary looked straight ahead, as if the wall had a window to a better day. The judge listened to the recording without expression. He read the deed to the foundation, the cognitive assessment, the council rules. He asked Victor about the listing. Victor spoke about miscommunication and urgency and family duties. The judge asked him to slow down and speak in whole sentences. When the judge finished, he granted the protective order for a year, referred the matter of the listing and the forged intent to the prosecutor, and stated that any future attempt to change my residence without my consent would be investigated as potential elder abuse. The last words opened a space in the air. Elder abuse sounds clinical and terrible. It sits between us like a cold plate. When we left the courthouse, Lena walked beside me silently. On the steps, she tried to take my hand. I let her and felt her finger bones thin from stress. Victor lit a cigarette. He does not normally smoke. He looked older than last month. He opened his mouth, closed it, then spoke. He said he was drowning. He said his business is brittle and the bank whispers threats. He said he thought if he solved one thing, everything else would hold. He said he did not realize the cost of turning his mother into a solution. I told him drowning men pull down everyone who swims too close if they do not learn to tread water first. He nodded. He crushed the cigarette with his shoe and walked away without looking back. The building's winter came with the smell of damp boots and boiled potatoes. My living room became a classroom every Sunday. We wrote letters to registries and practiced calling notaries with firm voices. We collected a list of honest people and a longer list of the ones who pretend. We built a phone tree titled Bells and Whistles. When Galina's cousin received a call from her son asking for a quick signature in front of a friendly neighbor, she called the tree. 4 women arrived in coats over nightgowns and stood like an oak in her kitchen until the neighbor left. In January, Sophia began to visit me on Tuesdays after piano. We played cards and whispered secrets about lemon. Anya started sending small notes, one about a recipe that worked, one about a job interview, one about a fight she refused to have. We never mentioned the folder or the notary. Sometimes silence heals with more discipline than conversation. In March, the prosecutor called Paulina. A plea agreement sat on the table. The agent would lose his license and pay a fine. The notary would accept a suspension and mandatory ethics training. Victor would receive a suspended sentence for attempted fraud, contingent on community service, at the shelter that will one day receive my apartment and on repayment of my legal fees. If he completed every hour and every payment within a year, the record would remain conditional rather than permanent. Lena cried when she learned this. She cried for the relief of a door not slamming. She cried for the shame of standing near that door when it could have shut forever. I signed the agreement with a pen that writes in smooth blue lines. Victor began to show up at the shelter on Wednesday mornings. He carried boxes, painted a hallway, sat on a tiny chair at a tiny table, and listened to a speech about trauma without checking his phone. He did not visit me. He did not call. He served his hours like a man trying to learn a new language. As an adult, slow, embarrassed, determined anyway. Spring washed my street in pale green. The chestnut tree across the courtyard opened its candles. That first day of full leaf, I made a decision that had been growing under the surface of my days. I arranged with the foundation to complete the transfer now rather than later, and to record formally my life tenancy. The apartment would not pass to any person. It would belong to its purpose. I wrote a letter to Yuri and placed it behind the wobbly bedroom doorframe, tucked like a talisman. I wrote that I chose peace that cannot be sold. I wrote that I kept the scar on the frame and the dent on the heart as matching marks of our family, honest and unvarnished. I invited Lena for tea. I told her what I did. She swallowed hard and nodded. She said she felt both pain and relief, and that both feelings felt deserved. She asked what it would mean for her and for Sophia. I said it meant my home is safe, and my door will open for them when they come in kindness and close when they come in greed. She said she understands. She asked if Sophia can still practice piano on my old instrument. I said the piano was built to be played and that the bench hides nothing dangerous anymore, only spare sheet music and a lace runner from my mother. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday, Victor knocked. He carried a paper bag that smelled like fresh bread. He looked thinner and more like the boy who used to sleep on the rug under the dining table during storms, because he liked the sound of rain on the windows. He spoke carefully. He said he worked at the shelter that morning and met a woman who reminded him of me, but with eyes that held a different kind of loneliness. He said he carried her donation of skirts and a coat and felt something shift. He said he wanted to replace the damage he did with something that adds. He looked at the wobbly bedroom door and smiled a little. He said he could fix it. I said no. I said some doors are supposed to stick because they remind us to push gently and lift with patience. He laughed softly and sat at the table. We ate bread with butter and salt, an old moment reborn. Summer turned the courtyard into a square of sunlight. My Sundays expanded. The classroom of women became a small movement. We prepared packets we call quiet armor. Inside each is a checklist and a sample letter and a recipe for apple cake because courage needs sugar. The council room key rests in my pocket now, out of habit. I carry it the way some women carry rosaries. The building men still argue about the elevator. I bring new locks and a thermos of tea and let them argue while I keep track of votes. They tease me that I see the world as paper and keys. I tell them that paper and keys are what keep wolves outside and bread warm inside. One evening in late August, I hosted a small dinner. Lena came with Sophia and a salad that finally tasted like her own style rather than a copied recipe from a magazine. Victor arrived late from the shelter, hands smelling of primer paint. Anya walked in quietly and set down a jar of jam with a label that read, "Lemon's Favorite," as if the cat could read. We ate slowly. We did not revisit the courthouse or the folder or the hushed months. We spoke about work and neighbors and the chestnut tree. After dinner, Sophia slid onto the piano bench and played a simple waltz. The bench did not squeak. The melody lifted the corners of the room. When they left, Lena hugged me differently. She did not try to own the hug. She simply held me and allowed herself to be held. Victor kissed the wobbly doorframe and grinned. Anya lingered. She thanked me for not burning the bridge with gasoline. I told her bridges last longer when they are made of stone and attention. She nodded and left. with a face that looked less like a mask. I am still the same woman who bakes dill bread when rain gathers over the river. I am also the woman who built a shelter around her life with stamps, signatures, and the courage to hold still in a storm. My children learned how easily love can be fractured by fear and how carefully it can be reset if no one reaches for the hammer again. My apartment is no longer a prize or a problem. It is the place where I will live until my hands no longer want to turn the key. After that, other women will sleep under this roof and learn that safety is a structure you can build with your own two hands, and a little help from those who remember how. On my kitchen wall hangs a calendar with 3 dates circled in red. The day I told my children I would think about a dormitory, the day I made the deed breathe new air, the day the judge spoke the words that returned my breath to me. The circles are not trophies, they are small lighthouses for the days that still roll in dark and heavy. I light a candle under them when the wind pushes through the corridor. The flame trembles and then steadies. I did not move to a dormitory. I did not keep only one room. I kept them all and filled them with wiser air. My home stands on paper and love now, not on hope alone. When Sophia visits, we count chestnut blossoms and feed Lemon a sliver of chicken from my hand. When Lena calls, we talk about recipes that belong to us and not to magazines. When Victor texts, he sends photographs of freshly painted shelter walls. The color is called Quiet Morning. I smile every time. My son is learning a new language. My daughter is learning gravity without cruelty. I am learning that strength can arrive as a deposit slip, a stamped copy, a full breath taken in front of a closed door that belongs to me. This is how it happened. This is how a woman who was told she would be more comfortable in one room remained in 5 and made each room a lesson in dignity.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.